Good evening, everyone. Severe Other Team 9 meteorologist Nathan John joining you live for this edition of Nate at 8. Today, we felt it. It was certainly warmer, but not real humid. Tomorrow, while cooler, that's when the humidity will further pick up. And we haven't had much of it here as of recent, but there's some rain chances returning here, even as early as this evening. That will carry over as we extend into tomorrow. So that's some of what we're going to be talking about for this edition of Nate at 8. Thank you so much for tuning in. Appreciate it as always. So coming up, some rain. Again, not a lot, but we are going to be tracking some returning going into tomorrow. Will certainly be more humid tomorrow. We'll feel it. It was a little more humid today, but it wasn't really humid, right? It still was pretty comfortable when it comes to that humidity. Tomorrow, though, I think that story changes. We'll feel it more. It's going to start to be more uncomfortable. But brief, because by the time we get into Thursday and Friday, we'll notice the humidity fall off with the rain chances dropping off as well before picking back up with another cold front passage this weekend. And behind that is when we get a pattern change next week. Overall, what doesn't change? A dry pattern, but it is a cooler pattern next week, a taste of fall. We've already had a little bit of a preview here earlier in the month, and we're going to get more of it going into next week. Highs likely even back into the 70s. Let's jump into things, shall we? Without further ado, starting off with those temperatures today, which again was certainly a hot day. Those highs did top off around 90. Now we're sitting in the 80s, warm, but still overall a pleasant evening across the area. Did actually manage to reach record values in New Philadelphia. Most of us were coming up short, and even by quite a bit. It just happens to be what's on record for New Philadelphia, which doesn't have the largest, expansive set of records, in terms of dating back. And that's likely one of the reasons why it did set a new record of 91 degrees. But other climate sites, Wheeling, Pittsburgh, more extensive climate records dating back further, not quite reaching record values, but nonetheless, a hot day, right? Across the area, those highs topping off around 90, but the humidity was low enough that it didn't feel any warmer than it already was. So it was hot, but you may have noticed if you got into that shade, a little bit of a breeze that, it wasn't too bad, right? And that's thanks to that humidity still not being too bad, despite it being a hot day across the Ohio Valley. While today featured lots of sunshine, barely a cloud in sight, not a day you would typically think about tracking some rain, right? We are going to be tracking some. It's on the doorstep now of that I-77 corridor in Coshocton, Holmes County, and Amish country, and just now entering into the northwestern portion of Muskingum County as well. And here within the next about hour, leading up closer to 9 o'clock, it's moving into that I-77 corridor. We get closer to 10, 11 o'clock, it's going to start to track east across the region. Now, these have already weakened quite a bit across east central Ohio, and that's going to be the trend. We're starting to lose that daytime heating, right? Those real hot temperatures we had earlier in the afternoon is starting to cool, so we're starting to lose more of that fuel for these showers and thunderstorms. So the overall intensity of these will likely continue to decrease. Could we still see some thunderstorms? Absolutely. Are we going to see severe thunderstorms? Likely not. Are we going to see any flooding? Likely not. So likely nothing impactful, but again, some rumbles of thunder, some heavy downpours, and certainly dealing with some cloud-to-ground lightning. It is possible. So, may get woke up if you're going to bed early by some rumbles of thunder overnight and certainly some heavy downpours. But thankfully, nothing of a real big impact coming our way into the overnight hours. Those showers and thunderstorms, as you can see, they're more scattered in nature. But what we're seeing arrive here early on tonight that will continue even leading past midnight, this could very well be the greatest coverage of rain that we're going to have as we go through the weekend. There's not a big rain threat really in sight. And the showers that we do see linger into tomorrow and return for the weekend, they look even more spotty and could even be more spotty than what we're dealing with setting up here going into the overnight hours. So certainly not a whole lot of rain heading our way. Austin, good evening. Today was so hot that it felt like walking into an oven this afternoon, ready for a cool down and hopefully some rain soon. Well, Austin, you're in luck with some rain at least. It's heading our way, although not too much south of I-70. You wouldn't be surprised if we at least deal with some of those showers developing south of I-70 is right, progressing throughout the night. But as it stands now, activity going to be more centered north of I-70 that's moving in here over the next couple of hours. Joe, good evening. Thank you both, Joe, Austin, and everyone for tuning in. I appreciate it as always. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Nate at 8. And Austin, ready for that cool down? Well, it's arriving next week. And again, some rain even arriving for this evening. So both are in sight. We look at what story reports. Well, even those showers and thunderstorms, even when they packed more of a punch back further to the west across central Ohio, still not reports coming in of any wind damage or any hail, and certainly not dealing with any tornado risk with these going into the overnight hours. But there's some damaging winds reported around Cincinnati, towards Indianapolis and Indiana as well. Again, likely nothing for our area, and these don't even have history of dealing with what's coming our way north of I-70, not even dealing with a history earlier in the afternoon when they were a bit stronger of any impacts. So certainly some good news that, some needed rain coming our way, but thankfully nothing that looks to bring any impacts as we extend into the overnight hours. And again, radar, it's looking quiet as we go into the overnight hours. We're going to be tracking some quiet conditions. Right now, again, we're going to be tracking some of that rain moving back in. So quiet right now, but as we jump into the future cast, you'll notice as we extend, again, I'd say over the next couple of hours, closer to 9-10 o'clock, I think Futurecast is doing a pretty good job of it, that we'll see these showers and thunderstorms progress across the area. And yes, these even can linger as we get closer towards the midnight mark and even later on tonight in the early morning hours. Although at this point becoming more isolated, just like what Futurecast is showing, we could see something linger even into the early morning hours tomorrow. So as we progress then throughout Wednesday, notice that we can't quite drop that chance of rain off completely, but it's just what we do see is much more spotty, likely more of just a shower activity, maybe a rumble of thunder at most, a bit just more spotty when it comes to any lingering shower. Nothing that's going to be really putting a damper on any outdoor plans that you have as we go throughout Wednesday. It will be cooler, but it does look humid tomorrow. Highs will be back in the 80s, even mid-lower 80s. So noticeable cool down with respect to today, but it's likely more humid tomorrow than it was for today. So in some ways, it may feel more uncomfortable tomorrow than it did for today, even despite trending cooler, just due to the fact that it's likely to be pretty muggy with those highs in the mid to lower 80s for Wednesday. And the humidity starts to then tune down a bit going into Thursday. Those high temperatures look similar, mid lower 80s, and maybe something stray continuing into Thursday. But again, same story, not going to put a damper on any outdoor activities, including, kick off of some high school football action for Thursday Night Lights game. Not going to put a damper on it by no means. Dealing with a stray shower, it's certainly nothing to cancel plans over the next couple of days with these spotty showers. And again, maybe a thunderstorm in the mix, as it's still going to be, I would say, mostly dry here over the next couple of days. And when the rain chance looks to fall off completely is Friday. I don't think we'll deal with any threat for any precipitation Friday before some of those more spotty showers and a thunderstorm can return then for the weekend. So you'll notice that as we look into our rain threat here over the next 7 days. So again, tonight we deal with those scattered showers and thunderstorms, likely nothing impactful, then more of that widely scattered or more of a few showers, a thunderstorm in place going throughout Wednesday. Again, more of that few spotty showers, a thunderstorm in place then going throughout the weekend. Just not a whole lot, something more stray or isolated possible Thursday, maybe going into next Monday as well. But you'll notice there's no widespread, more likely threat. I think even, again, what we have for tonight could very well be the greatest coverage that we have, even as we go through the weekend. So not a whole lot of precipitation. Again, what we do see, nothing canceling plans over the next couple of days, including this weekend as well. Just keep in mind that, yes, maybe that round of rain, maybe a round or two. I doubt it, but maybe a round of rain or two of anything you have planned. It's possible, right? It's possible Wednesday, Thursday, and again this weekend, but just not a whole lot of precipitation. This is still going to be a dry pattern in place, and we'll see if we can pick up at least something measurable at the Wheeling, Ohio County Airport, which has failed to even reach 1/10 of an inch so far for this month. Just a staggering low amount of precipitation. And we'll see with the drought monitor coming out this Thursday, we'll see where we're at. Likely more of the area starting to trend abnormally dry. We'll likely start to see that trend, just as we've been over 3 weeks now with with little measurable precipitation, 0.08 inches to be exact. That's what we've had over 3 weeks now at the Wheeling, Ohio County Airport. It's been over that. Now we're at 23 days. So even surpassing 3 weeks. And, what we do see here as we go through the weekend is likely not going to amount to too much, especially because it's more scattered as well. So it just depends if it's more hit or miss at the Wheeling, Ohio County Airport. Could very well add little to those rainfall amounts as we go throughout this weekend. Our high temperature is still pretty warm as we go through Saturday. Do we get back in the 90s? Likely not Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We could get back closer to it Saturday. We could. I think that there's good odds that we have seen our warmest temperatures, though, for this week. I think there's good odds for that. I think Saturday can be close, but I do think that there's good odds that our warmest temperatures have come and gone now after today with those highs into the 90s. And I think it's going to be hard to do, but we can get back closer to it Saturday. Overall, these are some warm days coming our way, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then, of course, we're all staring at the blue there early next week, right? That cool down. So there's our taste of fall returning Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Those highs struggling to get in the 80s, even starting Sunday, likely. I mean, it's a stretch there of what will likely end up being close to a week where highs are struggling to get into the 80s. Certainly going to be a cool down with those below normal temperatures, and lows will be back in the 50s into a good portion of that stretch as well. Starting into that Monday, we'll see those lows dip back into the 50s into the beginning of next week, and we'll see a stretch there of lows 50s, high 70s for a lot of that going into next week. So we'll start to see a cool pattern. Again, more of a taste of the upcoming season coming our way after a warm stretch here as we go through the weekend. So those are the temperatures. What about the humidity, right? We already touched on this some, but what we do see for tomorrow is likely going to be the most humid conditions. So, today still more tolerable. It was those dew points climbed up with respect to yesterday, but it wasn't a real humid day. It was still more tolerable. The temperature is more excessive, certainly, than the humidity. By Wednesday, we flip that. So for tomorrow, the heat not as excessive, but the humidity will be. So it's uncomfortably humid with those highs in the 80s. That's why I say, tomorrow, not as hot. And it's noticeably cooler with respect to today. But with the humidity picking up, some of us may say that it feels a little more uncomfortable to be outside tomorrow than it did for today, even despite us trending a bit cooler. It's certainly possible to feel that way. It's just going to be uncomfortably humid for your Wednesday with those highs back mid to lower 80s. Now, that doesn't last long, though, because by the time we get into Thursday and Friday, notice those dew points do drop back down. They'll pick up a little bit Saturday, maybe getting back to uncomfortable range in the afternoon on Saturday, but it doesn't last long. By the time we get into Sunday, those dew points are dropping off and temperatures start to drop off as well. You notice they're dropping all the way into refreshing, just that cool, crisp fall like mornings, returning by early next week as dew points plummet 50s, 40s, and that'll allow those lows to drop back in the 50s. And it's just going to be a pretty cool, comfortable stretch of weather for a lot of next week. But some hot and a bit humid, some warm and a bit humid days. That's the best way to describe what we have here as we go through Saturday. Generally warm, bit humid. The more excessive humidity is tomorrow. So uncomfortably humid Wednesday, more of a bit humid for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then just turning cooler and more refreshing by the time we get into Sunday. Joe says, appreciate what you do. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Hello there, Sarah. Cameron, West Virginia. Nice sitting on my porch. It is a nice evening, isn't it? Certainly a gorgeous evening, and just one of a lot we've had as recent, and I think a lot more to come as we go into next week. Although it may even have to put on may have to bundle up a little bit by next week as those temperatures start to cool. It's a little chill to the air especially those overnight hours, maybe even some of these evenings and into next week. Austin asking when we start seeing leaves changing colors. That'll be more so going into next month more into October, as we'll start to see more of that, Austin. Those leaves starting to change colors. It's coming up here soon. Not quite yet, but here soon. here soon. It's on its way. So that's some of the weather here near us. Nothing too crazy, right? It's a fairly quiet pattern. We have some showers and thunderstorms in the mix tonight. Some more spotty activity going into tomorrow as well as the weekend. But overall, these are still mostly, if not completely, dry days. Not too much active weather for us here into the Ohio Valley. Now, a lot of you may have questions and likely been keeping an eye on Hurricane Aaron, and especially if you had plans to go on vacation on the East Coast and head out to a beach, because unfortunately, this really puts an impact into some of those beaches on the East Coast, especially into the Carolinas. And extending north into Virginia, but especially to the North Carolina, seeing some of the greatest impacts from Hurricane Aaron, which currently has max sustained winds 105 miles per hour, Category 2, and anticipated to maintain its strength as a Category 2 hurricane as it tracks up the East Coast. You'll notice not anticipated to make landfall. So not going to make landfall, but as it tracks up the East Coast and then eventually turns northeast to go back further out into the Atlantic, as it does hug close to the coast, this is still going to bring some impacts, especially into the eastern portion of North Carolina, getting towards the Outer Banks. Anticipated to see some of the greatest impacts from this, likely around the Outer Banks. And this is where we do have tropical storm warning in effect across a good portion there of North Carolina. So again, if you were heading down this week into this weekend, into especially North Carolina, into the beaches, and this includes areas near Topsail, Surf City. We have that tropical storm warning in effect just north of Topsail Beach in North Carolina. This includes then up towards Emerald Isle, and then Cape Lookout, and then extending towards the north towards Ocracoke Island, and then Cape Hatteras, and then all of the Outer Banks up towards Kill Devil Hills, towards Corolla. So all of the Outer Banks there, south towards Emerald Isle, even towards Topsail Beach, a lot of that east coast of North Carolina under that tropical storm warning. And not that they're going to be dealing with significant impacts, that it's just that some of these locations are so low lying. I mean, not much above sea surface, that when you're dealing with storm surge, even up to 6 feet, that it's enough to start to flood some of those roadways, which if you don't want to get stranded or have emergency medical trying to respond to your location, not being able to access you because the roads are impassable, which is likely why we're seeing even storm surge up to 6 feet can cause some impacts, especially into the Outer Banks. Because again, it's dealing with the level there, not much above sea level. So dealing with that potential for storm surge up to about 6 feet, including the Outer Banks. This extends then down towards Cape Lookout, the Cape Lookout, then north through Ocracoke Island, up through the Outer Banks, Cape Hatteras, then extending all the way up towards, again, Corolla, Kill Devil Hills, a lot of the Outer Banks, and then extending south towards Cape Lookout. These locations have the potential to see the greatest storm surge up to about 6 feet, and that's certainly enough to cause some impassable roads into those areas. And I know they have the mandatory evacuation into the Outer Banks, as certainly going to be dealing with some recovery after that fact of clearing a lot of those roads, as I'm sure that can cause some havoc on the infrastructure, unfortunately, into the Outer Banks. Thankfully, dealing with the wind speeds still possible upwards of at least 50, 60 miles per hour, some of those wind gusts. So still dealing with even potential for some damaging winds, and that storm surge certainly enough that can cause some minor damage to structures, homes, certainly can cause some damage to those roads. I'm sure there can be some parts where they're impassable, which, even dealing with nothing significant in terms of impacts, but even that's enough that, trying to get people out of the Outer Banks, because, if you've ever been there, it's just, there's, one way in, one way out, right? And, if you've been to the Outer Banks, just how narrow those Outer Banks can be at spots. You can see the sound side and the ocean at the same view, and just how low-lying it is as well with respect to the sea surface. So it doesn't take much, unfortunately, to cause some impacts that could make those roads impassable and cause some scary, dangerous situations there in the Outer Banks. Is that peak storm surge up to 6 feet possible for those locations. So that's the latest on Aaron. Again, nothing significant, thankfully, not going to be making impact, but still could be some dangerous conditions conditions. And also worth noting as well, I know Jeff touched on this morning, the amount of water rescues being observed. A lot of people still trying to get out and swim, but those rip currents are dangerous right now. Dozens and dozens of water rescues across the east coast of especially Carolinas due to those dangerous rip currents right now. So definitely not advisable if you are watching this, or if are watching this into portions there that are under evacuation into the eastern part of the Carolinas, and even extending up through the eastern part of Virginia. Not advisable right now. Definitely a scary situation to be trying to swim with those life-threatening rip currents. A lot of water rescues occurred going throughout the day. So certainly not worth the risk, right? Not worth the risk. So certainly still some life-threatening, certainly some life-threatening there in terms of the rip currents, and even the storm surge, while not a real high number, that can still be enough to cause some damage to infrastructure into the Outer Banks, and even into some damage into homes. And certainly we'll have our thoughts and prayers with those impacted from Aaron, but certainly thankful, not going to be making landfall, but nonetheless still can bring some pretty dangerous impacts to portions, especially into North Carolina, around the Outer Banks, north of Topsail Beach through Emerald Isle, those locations under that tropical storm warning. And these impacts are mainly going to be felt over the next couple of days, but we could see some impacts even linger into the weekend, but especially over the next 2 days, as when we'll likely see some of those greatest impacts from those wind gusts, which could be in excess of 50, 60 miles per hour. So potential for some damaging winds. And then in addition to that, potential for storm surge, especially for the Outer Banks, up to 6 feet possible, which is certainly enough to cause damage to roads and some homes into those areas. Rhonda says we need rain. I agree. Absolutely. We do need some rain coming our way. And the good news is there's some. It's just not a whole lot. We do have some arriving here even over the next couple of hours. The activity moving into the area now is primarily north of I-70. I do think we can see some spotted south of I-70 as well as the night does progress. But what we see overnight and what we see for tomorrow, it's still just hit or miss. There's no widespread needed rain coming our way here for the overnight hours or for tomorrow or even for the weekend. What we see is likely more spotty with those showers and thunderstorms. But we could pick up at least another round of rain or two over a given location this weekend. Just nothing worth canceling plans over. This is still mostly, if not completely dry days. There's certainly no guarantee to see rain for these days ahead through the weekend. But we have a few of those more spotty showers, a rumble of thunder for Wednesday, maybe something stray Thursday. No threat for rain at all Friday. And then more of those spotty showers and a thunderstorm over the course of the weekend. And that threat will likely fall off completely next week. Lots of sunshine will break back out as we get a taste of fall, high 70s, lows into the 50s for a lot of next week. That's going to be the story. We'll notice those lows back in the 50s, even as early as Monday morning. And we'll stay in the 50s, at least going through Thursday morning. We can dip back into still close, but we could fall back to around 60 with next Friday. Highs at that point can climb back to around 80. So they can climb back up into that following weekend. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. As always, I appreciate it. Hope you had a wonderful day, and hope we could stay cool with those highs back into the 90s. Tomorrow, again, it's cooler, but unfortunately that humidity, it picks up. So it's going to be still pretty uncomfortable despite being noticeably cooler. That cool down could be even close to 10 degrees tomorrow with those highs, lower 90s to lower 80s. It's possible. Some of those locations could be almost 10 degrees cooler, but keep in mind, still uncomfortably humid. Humidity likely worse tomorrow than it was for today. And then not too bad. The humidity does lower Thursday, Friday, and then really falls off by next week when we get that taste of fall. Michelle, you're going to love that weather coming up next week. We get another taste of it. Our second preview of fall is ahead for next week. Another tease of that upcoming season. That's for sure. And this coincides with the kickoff, the pumpkin spice. I got to always mention the pumpkin spice. So if you didn't know, pumpkin spice, it kicks off, if you're a fellow fan of pumpkin spice beverages, the pumpkin spice Coffee kicks off tomorrow at Dunkin', and it's next Tuesday, I believe, at Starbucks. So the fall menu drops at Dunkin' for tomorrow, and I think next Tuesday is Starbucks. Fitting, especially for next week, with that drop in temperatures. In case you wanted to know, maybe a lot of you think maybe not a fan, but in case you wanted to know, that when the pumpkin spice hits Starbucks and Dunkin', there you go. And now you know. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. As always, I appreciate it. I hope everyone has a wonderful night. You can catch me coming up News 9 at 10 on Fox 9, News 9 tonight at 11 for the latest. And as always, that next edition of Nate at 8 will break down the latest on where we stand with those rain chances through the weekend coming up tomorrow evening. And well, good time to stay tuned here early on tonight as we'll track at least some rain moving through our area coming up at 10 and 11 o'clock. So stay tuned for that as we'll track some rain moving through our area. I appreciate it as always. Have a wonderful night, and I'll see all of you on the next edition of Nate at 8.